Well, hello, anatomy students. Mrs. Shelton here, giving you the third and final lecture of Chapter 10 on our senses. We are talking about our last special sense today, which is your sense of sight. So we'll talk about your eyes and then also have some fun activities for you guys to do as well. So when we do talk about our sense of sight, Chapter 10, Section 9 of your reading guide, um, we all understand what our eyes look like. However, when we're looking at our eye, we actually need to be aware of what these different parts do and also recognize from our pupil this black spot in your eye, which is actually not a structure at all, it's just a hole that's here in your iris. The iris is the colored portion of your eye. This is actually going to be opening and closing. It's a reflex in order to adjust how much light comes into the pupil. And then the white part of your eye, which is the sclera, and then the part that you can't see here because it's clear that the sclera extends to, which would be your cornea on top. This is the parts of the eye that we typically see, but we need to make sure that we are identifying all the parts of the eye. We will get to this particular diagram and making sure that you can identify all these parts and you understand how they're all responsible for our sense of vision. Now, here's a kind of a disturbing picture when you look, but I do need you guys to understand that with your eye, this pink part of your eye underneath your eyelids, it's a very sensitive mucous membrane called the conjunctiva. So you can actually look from the side over here. This pink part, if you've ever seen your eyelids pulled down, it's pink in color. It's a mucous membrane. This is actually where a lot of bacteria and virus gets to your body. And sometimes bacteria can actually start causing an infection here. And that bacteria that does not get killed by the tears have an enzyme in there that breaks them down. Same with a lot of viruses in here. But with that, that bacteria can start building up in that area, and that's what we refer to as pink eye or conjunctivitis. Is what that is called. So here you actually see this bacteria crusting in this area. But this is also why right now, as we are at home, because of COVID-19, viruses can enter into your body through this conjunctiva as well. So this is also why if you're trying to protect yourself from getting COVID-19, just a face mask alone is not going to help you unless you are covering your eyes as well, complete shield, in order to prevent that virus from getting into your mucous membranes in your mouth, your nose, and then also the conjunctiva in your eyes. Now, another part of your eyes that you should be aware of, it's very important that we have a constant supply of tears. So keep it moist in order to get oxygen to these cells. Oxygen actually diffuses better through moist environments, and then also to get some of this debris and extra cells with all the cell turnover constantly flushed out. We have a lacrimal gland, and this lacrimal gland is constantly releasing tears, and so when we blink, we're kind of flushing our eyes out, and we have this drain in the corner of your eye down here. And this drain actually helps drain that fluid down into your nasal cavity through this nasolacrimal duct. So if you've ever cried and you realize and you wonder, okay, I'm crying and now my nose is running, gosh, I'm looking ugly now. So that ugly cry experience. Well, because all of those tears, well, they're going to be draining not just out, but also then down this nasolacrimal duct too into your nose. This is also why too, you can try this, is next time you are swimming underwater and you've got a mask on, you know, actually hold your nose, you can blow bubbles out your eyes if you ever wanted to do that. So let's take a look at this diagram. So the parts that you will be responsible for are all the parts that are highlighted in yellow. So all of the yellow highlights, those are the ones that you need to have labeled and make sure that you are understanding is what you should be doing. Now, when we look at this picture of the eye, this is the part we looked at. This is the part that we see. This is the cornea. So the cornea is actually an extension of this really tough outer layer called the sclera. So the sclera, we can look, goes all the way around. It's a really, really tough connective tissue all the way around. Your eyes are pretty darn strong. They're not little grapes that are going to rupture easily. That doesn't mean go poke them. But your sclera continues all the way around. This is what's giving the eye its strength. But then right in the front, it actually turns clear, and that clear is the cornea. Now, your cornea is actually the first structure of your eye that is helping you to see. Because what has to happen, all of this that's actually helping you to see, it's the retina that's the most important part of your eye. This retina, this is a very thin layer of nervous tissue that has photoreceptors in the back. So the retina is in the very back of your eye. This is what has to detect all of the light that is coming through in a focused manner. We'll talk more about focused in the meantime. But your retina, back of your eye, that's the most important part of your vision. And then the retina is going to send signals out the optic nerve to your brain in order to be able to interpret what those signals are. But we have to make sure that the light that does come through gets focused properly onto this retina. And that's what most of these structures are going to be for, is for ensuring that we can get that light to angle and to get focused onto the retina so the brain can get a clear image of what we are trying to view. So this cornea, this first outer layer, this clear layer on the outside of your eye, this is actually going to be the first structure that is for focusing your eye. It's actually going to bend the light because of its shape. It actually, as light comes through, light actually bends at an angle as soon as it hits that cornea to try to get the light to go through this pupil, through that hole that is in your iris. Now, the iris, we can actually see here, this iris is this colored portion. And with that colored portion, that can actually expand and contract depending on how much light is available. If you walked outside into bright daylight, it's actually going to narrow down really, really tiny. And if you're in dark light, it's going to open up in order to allow maximum amount of light. And so this is all trying to protect that retina that is very photosensitive from not getting damaged from having too much light exposure. Now, the cornea is going to focus that light through the pupil. The lens is going to be adjusting how much light comes through that pupil, but it's now trying to get that light to go through the lens. The lens is actually behind your iris, and this lens, I'm really bummed that you guys don't get to dissect an eye. The lens is just probably one of the coolest structures in any animal that has a lens, because this particular lens is just cell after cell, but it's clear, but it magnifies light because this lens is going to be the second structure for refracting and bending light. Now, when we need to focus things up close or we need to focus things far away, this lens is flexible. And so there's muscles that are attached to this lens in order to be able to stretch the lens out or to get it to compress back in order to focus the light when we are changing our depth of vision. Now, the ciliary body and these ciliary muscles are what are going to now be allowing the lens to focus and change shape. Now, we can't change the shape of our cornea, but your body can adjust to changing the lens in order to then be able to get that light at the right angle. So now the light projects an image of what you are seeing onto the retina. And there we'll talk about our photoreceptors a little bit in more detail, but it's the retina then that's going to detect that light. Now, this whole main area in here, this is filled with a gelatinous goo that is called the vitreous humor. And that's going to maintain the shape of the eye. It's going to maintain proper pressure of the eye as well. But this really should be kind of this clear, thicker liquid that helps the eye maintain its proper shape. Now, also in this area in here, behind the cornea and in front of the iris is a region that's called the anterior chamber. And this anterior chamber, or this anterior cavity, is actually filled with a liquid. Again, it maintains pressure, keeps the cornea in its proper shape. It's called the aqueous humor. So you actually have two different types of liquid. So you've got your aqueous humor that's behind the cornea, and then you've got your vitreous humor that is in the body of the eye, is where that is. Now, back here, where we've got our retina, and this is just this very, very fine sheet of neurons. I mean, it's super, super sensitive. Again, really bummed that we don't get to dissect an eye, but do the activity. That's the virtual eye dissection, so you can actually see it a little bit more. But that all sends this information through the optic nerve. Now, there is one region in the back of your eye where there's actually no photoreceptors on it. And so it's right here at this optic nerve, there's a region that doesn't have any nerve endings on it that's called the optic disc. So this optic disc is actually your blind spot. Now, your blind spot visually is actually kind of out in your peripheral vision, so you can actually, but your brain will kind of show you hopefully an activity that does blind spot activities, but your brain actually fills in that space. Otherwise, you'd constantly have these little black spots that were following you around all the time. It'd be a little freaky. So your optic disc, actually technically your blind spot, but your brain fills in what it thinks should be in that space. And this is a region that's on the optic nerve that does not have photoreceptors on it. But those are the parts of your eye. So be familiar with what those are. And then that also answers some of the questions that I addressed on your reading guide too. Here's just a diagram that shows you some of the muscles that are attached to your eye. So your eyes can actually be moving in very finite motions, and you can control your vision. Here again is another picture that is helping you understand those ciliary muscles and those muscles that are making your lens thicker or thinner depending on what we are trying to view. Now, here is the part of life that will happen. When you hit your 40s, you will probably have to start using some reading glasses or help with your vision because your lens actually, as you age, starts losing its flexibility. And so with that, it's harder for your lens to stretch out enough to be able to see close-up vision. That's where most older people have to wear reading glasses. Now, here's a diagram that I need you guys to understand too that's going to help us understand this retina just a little bit better. Because this retina, so with the retina, here's where light is, but this is trying to show you with the retina these nerve endings that are all lined up and waiting for photons. So photons are packets of light that come through. They are waiting to actually absorb those photons in order to then be able to send a signal to the brain that, oh, I just caught a photon, and this is the photon I caught, and then the brain can interpret that particular signal. Here's actually a picture of the retina. This is what your eye doctor, actually, when they are getting up close and personal with their light or they take a picture, they are taking a picture of your retina in order to be able to identify if there's any issues there, making sure there's adequate blood supply to the retina as well, making sure the optic nerve looks good. They're also making sure there's no melanoma in the back of the eye. When we talk about light, here's just your little brief lesson on what light is. What our retina can detect is visible light. So of the electromagnetic spectrum, this is packets of energy that travel at the speed of light. So from gamma rays to radio waves, they have different frequencies in which they travel, where what we can see is this very, very narrow band that we call the visible spectrum. And what is different about like purple light versus red light is the wavelength or the frequency. Purple would have a really high frequency, super high vibrations of those photons, and your red light would actually have much lower vibrations. And so we have visual pigments in our retina that are designed to detect these different frequencies of light. They can only absorb certain frequencies, just like pigments that are in your clothes, pigments that are in plants. Pigments are proteins that can only absorb certain frequencies or conversely the wavelength of light. When we talk about lenses, so I talked about the cornea and I also talked about the lens, we need to recognize this term refraction because these lenses refract light, meaning they bend light. And so all lenses, whether it's a camera lens, whether it's the lens that is on my computer right now, those lenses are all bending light in order to create a focal point or a focus of these images for us. So recognize that naturally in our eyes, we have the cornea that's our first refracting surface, and then we have our lens that is the second refracting surface. Which brings us to what happens when your eyeballs are too short or too long. So you've got your cornea and your lens that are doing the focusing, supposed to bring the focal point directly to the retina. But for some of us, our eyeballs are too long, like me. Everything about me is long at 6'4". I happen to be very nearsighted. So I can see things up close really well, but if I don't have my glasses on, I cannot see street signs. So I can see up close, meaning my eyeball is too long. And so what ends up happening is my cornea and my lens focus things way in front of my eye. So what I have to do is I have a third lens. So I wear contact lenses, And that's a third lens that actually now refracts the light a little bit differently in order to get the focal point back on my retina. For somebody who is farsighted, they are farsighted because they can see distances, but they can't see up close. Their eyeball is too short. And so, with that, again, you wear lenses. So, either a contact lens or a glass lens that's going to be that third refracting surface for you so we can get light to bend and project onto the retina properly. Some people choose with their vision to actually have laser surgery. So one of the activities I'm going to have you guys go through is look at what LASIK surgery is all about. And really what it's all about is resurfacing the cornea. So now that bends the light properly for the length of what your eyeball is. Now, other activities that I'm going to have you guys look at is some different careers. So you guys can take a look at what an ophthalmologist, optician, optometrist do. I'm also going to have you guys do some different vision tests. So test your color vision. I'm going to test your visual acuity. Also have you understand what an astigmatism is. These are charts that sadly are still in my classroom. They've been in the classroom, but we don't get to do these labs together because of COVID-19. But I will still find you guys some activities to do online for visual acuity and also for astigmatism. Now, what an astigmatism is, some of you guys have astigmatisms, and the astigmatism is actually this irregularity of the cornea. So, in different parts of some people's cornea, it's a little bit too thick or too thin compared to the rest of the consistency. So, it bends light a little bit differently. So, in certain regions, you have kind of these, it's a little bit unclear in some areas, but other areas are different. We would have in class checked what your field of view is. So I'll try to find an activity for you to do that. But we'll also look at some common disorders of the eye as well, because this is really important. Most of us rely very, very heavily on our vision as our sense. And so with some of these disorders of the eye, we should just be familiar with some of these common vision issues. Are. And so that's another activity I'm going to have you guys do. So with that, I'm going to say adios to you for chapter 10. Hopefully the activities you guys find engaging. Hopefully these presentations have really helped you out to understand the material a little bit better. And then also remember, not only do you have your textbook in order to complete the reading guide, but I also gave you the key as well. So my key to the reading guide, so you guys can answer that too. But anyway, I miss you guys. I really hope that to see you guys again really soon. But hope you guys are staying safe, and I will talk to you soon.